Good morning and welcome to Mad PD 2020. My name is Deanna Toxopius and I'm an itinerant teacher of assistive technology here in Ottawa with the OCDSB. Today I'd like to talk to you about virtual teaching with EquatIO MathSpaces. So in this time of learning online, it's a challenge sometimes for teachers to teach a subject like math. There's a program called EquatIO. It's an extension for Chrome. It's actually free for all teachers, and I've got it installed here. If you click on the little blue square, once it's installed, it'll open up at the bottom of the screen. This program comes to you from Text Help, the same people who bring you Read and Write. So it opens up at the bottom of the screen, whereas Read and Write would open up at the top of the screen. And the place I really wanted to take you today would be MathSpaces. So there's two versions of MathSpaces. There's one that allows you to insert a MathSpace into the Google Doc that you're working on. And just a quick aside, this program works really well in all of G Suite. Those of you who are familiar with Read and Write know that it doesn't work as well in programs like Slides or Sheets, but EquatIO, on the other hand, actually works really well in Docs and Sheets and Slides. So it really does lend itself to whatever piece of the Google software you're using. So it looks like Loki's Infinity Cube. If you're a fan of the Avengers, it's where you have the EquatIO symbol inside the cube. And when you click on it, it's going to open up another tab. And this tab is a digital whiteboard space. And so you can use it to do any of the virtual manipulative stuff that you need to do. You will be asked to sign in with your Google account. Again, the EquatIO and the MathSpaces are free to all teachers. Here I have to select my account. It is a premium feature for students. So parts of EquatIO are free for students, parts are premium. So if your board has a subscription to EquatIO, your students have access to this piece of software. If they don't, you will have access to it as you're a teacher, and you can use it for teaching classes using software like Google Meet. And in fact, I have Google Meet up, and I'm going to show you that in a second. So here I could do a lesson. I could be in the middle. So here I have my Meet and I'm presenting in Meet, talking to the kids, blah, blah, blah. And when I'm ready, I can actually click on Present Now and open up, and I can share either a window. I'm going to choose the entire screen, and you can see that it's giving me the window in the window in the window infinity. I click on that and then I click on Share. And now it's going to go through a little I'm going to be presenting. You are presenting your screen, and you can see that it's doing the little whir as I'm presenting to everybody. And so now I can actually go back to my MathSpace, and now I'm presenting to everybody in my Meet. Meet is letting me know, hey, you're presenting to everybody in your Meet. So I'm just going to close that to get that out of the way, and I'm going to close my little Screencastify menu. And so now I can use all of the tools of EquatIO to present to my students. So for example, I can open up the equation editor, and I can actually type math. So here's something that's kind of cool, guys. I'm a grade 7-8 teacher, and one of the things we work with are fractions. And fractions on the computer are a pain. If you've ever tried to do fractions on Google Docs, you know what I'm talking about. Fractions are as easy as this. I'm just going to type 1, and then I did a slash, and that gave me half. So you see how quick that was? I'm going to use my arrow key to move up. And I'm just going to do plus, and then I'm going to do 3, and then instead of the slash, I'll show you the other way to do it. I'm going to start typing the word over, and you see that the word over just pops up, and when I click on it, look at that. You see how easy that was? That's incredibly easy. And when I'm ready, I will insert that math into my MathSpaces. Now, when you insert something into MathSpace, it wants to go into the upper left-hand corner. So I'm just going to click on the equation editor to make that go away, and then I can just drag that over here. Okay, so there's other tools within MathSpaces you can use. One of the cool ones is this, which is the graph editor. So this links into the Desmos graphing calculator. So you can actually graph expressions or equations. So a common one we do in grade 7-8 is this one, where we do x plus and then 9, let's say. So there it is graphed on my graph. Now the other option I can also do, and this is really cool, if you're familiar with tips, there's a wonderful activity in the clips, animated accompaniment to tips that shows you about the impact of the multiplicative versus the constant on the slope of the graph. And so if I go AX plus B, and it'll ask me if I want to add a slider. And I'm going to say I want to add it for all. And so now I have a slider. And A is, of course, the multiplicative. And if I drag it, I can move that around like that. Okay, and it sees that the slope, it's the slope changes, but the position on the graph on our Cartesian plane does not change. And I can, but if I click on this, the kids see that the slope doesn't change, but it is in fact the position, the starting point on the X or the Y axis of this graph changes. And this is something that you could then demonstrate in a lesson online to your kids, because I'm sharing my screen via Meet. All the kids can see this. You could even lead the kids through how to do this and then have them play with it themselves offline, because while most students, once they see this, will get the concept, every year I've taught this concept, I've had 1 or 2 kids who are convinced they can prove me wrong. And in doing this, if I show it this, they can, if they have access to EquatIO, they could go off and do this for a couple hours and try and break the graph. They won't be able to, but they can. They can adjust the size of the graph. You can see that where the A and B stop, you can change those numbers. Right now it's -10 to 10, but you could make it like -1,000 to 1,000, and they could just play with it for a few hours. So that's the Desmos graphing calculator. It's kind of cool. A couple other really cool features here. And again, that'll insert, like if you want to insert that graph into your MathSpace, you absolutely can. That's what insert graph says here. Couple other really cool features, and this is where I want to get into some cool stuff. This is the shapes menu. So in the shapes menu, when it initially opens up, there are only 8 shapes present. But in Google land, 3 dots means more. The Timbits there mean there are more. So you're going to click on the Timbits and you get a menu that pops up. So we're going to search for my favorite, which is pattern blocks. Anybody who knows me knows I love pattern blocks. They are my absolute favorite manipulative. So I'm going to click on pattern blocks, and I am going to click and then drag, and you can see how the manipulatives show up on screen. So now, if your students are like my students, before I can teach with these, I need to change their colors, because these don't match the color of the pattern blocks in my classroom. And if I don't change the colors, all I'm going to hear about is that that's not the right color. So I click on it so that there's a blue box around it, and now I'm going to click on the paint bucket. And I'm going to find my yellow, and that's not the right shade of yellow, so I'm going to move that up. There we go, that's better. And I'm going to click off, and I'm going to click over here on my trap, my good friend, and then I'm going to make that red. There we go, beautiful. And this is a brown. If you know anything about the pattern blocks I have, this is a brown. That's good. And then it's a beigey brown, and then this one is an orange. I'm going to make that a bit more orangey. There you go. So the beautiful. So there's my shapes. And you can copy them in all the ways in which you copy things. So I can click on it. There's a copy and a paste. Paste, you can also do the Control-C, Control-V. So there you go. I can make as many copies of that as I want. So I can use this to model, if I wanted to model 1/2 plus, I didn't pick great numbers for this, but that's not a big deal. I can actually click on this and go back in, and I can pull it. Now, if that doesn't appear there, because sometimes it doesn't appear, if I click on Edit Math, it'll actually pull it back in, and I can go in and make this something that I can use these things to represent, and I can replace the math, and you see how it just changes. It's really cool. And so now I can come in and I can say, okay, so I have 1/2 and 1/3, how much of the whole? And again, you're going to say, well, I can't see my shapes. Not a problem. I have order here, and I can send it backwards. And then the kids can sort of figure out how much of that hexagon I've covered. So it's a really cool way to sort of represent, anything really that we're doing in math. Things that you would normally use your manipulatives in your classroom for, you can normally find those manipulatives in EquatIO. There's a second set here, and my cursor's kind of hovered over it. It's called Smart Shapes. This is really cool. If you click on this, these are interactive shapes. So these are ways for you to do things. So another thing you might do is measure the angles on a shape as part of your proof that it is a hexagon or proof that it's a square. So let me just grab my square, and I'm going to make a copy of the square, and I'm going to paste it. I'm going to just move that over. Okay. And then here is, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger because right now it's not super large. So I've made that square bigger. And here in my smart shapes, I'm going to grab the protractor. So I'm going to click and drag my protractor, and it's going to open up. Just give it a sec. And now I can bring this and hover this over my shape, and I can measure my shape. And you can change now. The box here are all the properties of any of the shapes or the objects that we bring in. If you can't see what we need, don't worry about it. Just start closing these little triangles, and you see what starts to happen, how more options kind of pop into the box. And here's the cool thing. This is a single scale protractor, which is something I really like because I've encountered a lot of students in my practice who can't read a double scale protractor. So if let's say I wanted to measure this angle, well, that could be a little challenging for my students because they may not know to subtract 90 from 180. But I can always see this little thing here, this little slider. If I click on it, it'll actually change the direction in which the protractor is pointing. And now my 0 is actually where I need it to be. And I can read and see that that's a 90-degree angle. Now you can also rotate it like any shape in these kind of graphic programs. There's a little dot at the top, and you can rotate it. It doesn't rotate around the crosshairs here. I wish it did. So the origin point would be this. It doesn't really rotate around that. But that's easily adjusted for by just moving it around. So again, this is something you could use in your class, in your virtual teaching sessions with your students, and use it to teach math, help you teach math. It's very straightforward. It is a Chrome extension. It's called EquatIO. It's like equation without the N. Go to the Chrome store, search for EquatIO. You can install it on your Chrome browser. And like I said, it is free for all teachers. And you know what? Check with your district tech people. You may already have a subscription to this and not be aware of it, so that it would be free for your students as well. Thanks for joining me this morning. I hope that you're all safe and happy and healthy. If you have any questions, I'll be on Twitter for the next 15 minutes or so answering questions, but you can always tweet at me and I would be happy to answer questions for you. Thanks.